Well, I just kind of remember my last dream. It feels like I'm somewhere that feels a little bit like between a restaurant and a place where you dance. I'm sitting at a table with a group of people, including a man who feels just enough older than me that he might be a little interested, but also feels like he's too old, so he's got a little guardian energy to him. And the other thing I have is I have a rabbit. It's actually supposedly a wild rabbit, but I seem to be able to pick it up and hold it now and then and pet it. But my problem is I know that rabbit's also meant to be cooked, but that means you have to kill it and cut it up. I'm having a lot of problems with this. I might go dance. I might go hold the rabbit. I'm looking at the rabbit. Where'd it go? And I'm just really having problems with this. And then another woman at the table just goes over when nobody's looking. She cuts the head off the rabbit. Well, now I've got the dilemma, like no one else has particularly noticed this. And I've gone out and I've danced. I've noticed my guardian guy doesn't seem to want me to dance with a particular person. I've even put a red coat on the table for some reason. But now I've realized I can't avoid it any longer. I'm going to have to finish this. So I go over to the restaurant area, and there's a friend of mine standing at the counter, and she's got 2 knives in front of her. So I ask her if I can borrow a knife, and she looks at me like, what do you want a knife for? And I said, I have to cut up a rabbit. And she says, oh, I hate doing that too. I have to kind of skin it and everything. I just dread this whole thing. So she gives me the knife. So I go back to find the rabbit. And that was when the alarm went off.
You're doing some sort of play or act job on yourself in terms of a tendency or quality of your nature. In other words, rabbit symbolizes a mannerism in which you have something about you that is on an energetic, attractive level or fascination level or magnetic level. You have an identification that is out of control or is something that has a way of causing you to have an inclination of responding that is not in keeping with your natural flow in an emptiness. In other words, you identify or recognize a part of you that is causing your attention to be swayed to having to act out or be in a particular way. The rabbit is identifying that quality in your nature, but the vibe of the dream is that you're destroying it. In other words, you're not letting it control you. And you are rising above those traits and tendencies that normally sway to how it is that you're able to be in terms of a trueness to yourself. And what's happening is your dream shows you having to challenge that. You're using that which you identify that can have its effect upon you. And you're recognizing that it has its effect upon you. And you're killing that effect. You're not allowing yourself to become a victim of that vibration. It's kind of a dangerous thing to do, too. Will it take and impair your naturalness to do that? I mean, that's what I would be inclined to think on one hand whenever you do anything really directly to yourself. But the dream's not saying that. It's in the air, that sense that you feel yourself having to do this as a type of duty or something in terms of how you understand the space needs to be. Are you doing something to yourself that you're going to end up regretting later? I mean, that would be the question that one would wonder looking at something like this down the road. The only way that you're going to be able to make that determination, and you can make that in the moment, is look at what it does in terms of how you cringe or how you contract. Can you find a freedom state inside of that? Can you find some sense that expands, that blossoms, that just gets released to probe out on its own anew by killing the rabbit quality in your nature? In other words, is that rabbit quality in your nature preventing you from reaching a deeper insight and energetic flow and balance? That's the only way you can gauge something like this. This is a dream from the standpoint that we each carry a depth inside of ourselves that is like a beatitude. By beatitude, I mean it's a quality or characteristic that emerges out of an emptiness. And it is something that is intrinsic to who we are. And in terms of getting rid of or addressing or working to deal with certain mannerisms and traits that have a dictate or a flow in terms of how it is that we're able to be, you have to take and determine in the empty space that exists when you get rid of a trait, a quality that is influencing your mind and your actions. You have to be able to find mushrooming up. Once something like that is set aside or gotten purged or taken out of the equation of its normal dictates, you have to find rising up inside of yourself something anew. On the basis of how this something anew actually feels is the way that you can tell that what you're doing is right or not right. Purging something or to kill something or to get rid of something just for the sake of the fact that it needs to be done in some opinion or reasoning center inside of yourself is not good enough, because the tendency is too great for that just to be a conceptualization. And therefore, what it is that you go after to annihilate or set aside at a place that's outside of its effect or influence upon you, that is something that can actually take something away from you. The way you are able to determine if that process where you are doing away with something that you feel is in the road of the process is based upon how something comes out from the depth of emptiness and space inside of yourself. It's how something comes out and has its effect or influence upon a deeper depth inside of you. That effect or that influence of something that normally cannot come to the fore, when it does, is the determinant of whether or not what you're doing is proper or appropriate or not. None of the thought processes carry the validity. It's just the value that rises up from the heart when you're taking and you're doing something of a type of letting go, or as you would say, killing something, that is having a deleterious effect because it multiplies and spawns more and more and more impulses and thoughts and mannerisms in your nature that you feel are out of control. Once something like that is quieted, this space can possibly arise, and when this space arises, your noticeability of this empty space is what you're able to utilize as your means of determining if you've done something right or not. In a way you never quite know when you go and you contend with a part of yourself that you don't like. This is where discrimination is very, very difficult and important. When you see some part of yourself that has sway over you and you're trying to deal with that, you never really know if you're doing something that is completely right or not. You can have your view that it has to be done because it is controlling you. It has this quality that just breeds more and more of the same that then limits you from being able to function in this empty space. But whether it is important or it is an aspect that is coming out of this empty space, that you don't really know until you take and you stop the effect or the influence upon you to see what the empty space by itself, in its own capacity, is able to resonate. And how that resonates and what comes out of that as a consciousness and the freedom inside of yourself is the basis upon which you know whether you did the right thing or not. It is something, in other words, that is done by an expansive quality and wholeness in terms of the way you feel. And at the time, you are taking and dealing with something that has an effect or an influence upon you. That something that you're dealing with may actually be interesting to you as a pattern of vibration. And it's only after you recognize that somehow or another you're liking it, or you're grabbing onto it, or you're trying to shape yourself in relationship to it, so you set it aside. It is only after you do that that you come to realize whether it is repressing something deeper in terms of a hidden emptiness or quietness inside that can't make itself known as long as this loudness is in the way.